"Touch me and I'll scream," she warned. The mafia boss just smirked, then let the city hear. The smell of wet ash and burnt timber clung to the inside of Maya Collins' throat. It was a thick, acrid taste that no amount of swallowing could dislodge. She stood on the edge of the police cordon, her boots sinking into the mud that had formed from the mixture of fire hose runoff and the relentless Harbor City drizzle. She checked the playback on her camera one last time. The screen illuminated her face in the darkness, highlighting the smudge of soot on her cheekbone and the dark circles under her amber eyes. The shots were good. They were gritty and raw. She had captured the exact moment a firefighter had kicked through the burning door of the warehouse, silhouetted against a roaring orange inferno. It was the kind of image that might actually convince her editor at the Harbor Independent to cut her a check before the end of the week. Maya lowered the camera, letting it hang heavily against her chest by its strap. The adrenaline that had fueled her for the last 2 hours was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. It was past 2 in the morning. The city was asleep, or at least the decent part of it was. She pulled her canvas jacket tighter around herself and turned away from the flashing red and blue lights. The nearest subway station was 6 blocks away, but the walk would take her too long, and her feet were already aching. There was a shortcut through the packing district near the docks. It was a maze of corrugated iron fences, shipping containers, and narrow alleys that smelled of salt water and diesel, but it would shave 20 minutes off her journey home. At this hour, the district was usually deserted. Maya kept her head down, her steps quick and silent. The street lamps here were old, buzzing yellow sodium lights that flickered and cast long, dancing shadows against the brickwork of closed factories. She turned a corner onto a narrow service road that ran parallel to the water. The fog was rolling in off the harbor, thick and gray, muting the distant sounds of the city. Then she heard it. It was not the sound of industry or the rumble of a truck. It was a voice, low and pleading, followed by a sharp, wet thud. Maya froze. Her instincts, honed by 3 years of chasing ambulances and fire trucks, screamed at her to turn around and run, but the journalist in her, the part of her that was desperate for a story that mattered, kept her feet planted. She stepped into the shadow of a dumpster, peering around the rusted metal edge, 50 feet away, under a single, flickering street lamp. 3 men stood in a triangle. 2 of them were broad, wearing dark, heavy coats that did not quite conceal the bulk of weapons beneath. The 3rd man was on his knees. He was weeping, his hands raised in a gesture of absolute surrender. Maya stopped breathing. She recognized the silhouette of the man in the center, though his back was to her. He was tall, wearing a suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass. His posture relaxed, almost bored. The man on his knees choked out a sob. "Please," he begged. "I did not know. I swear to you." The man in the suit did not raise his voice. His tone was smooth, carrying effortlessly through the damp air. "You did know. That is the unfortunate part." Maya's hand moved of its own accord. She lifted the camera. It was muscle memory. It was a reflex. She did not think about the danger. She only thought about the frame. The flickering light above them created a perfect, terrifying chiaroscuro effect. She focused the lens. The man in the suit raised a handgun. He did not hesitate. He did not monologue. He simply fired. The crack of the gunshot was swallowed by the heavy fog, dull and final. The man on the knees crumpled forward onto the wet pavement. Click, click, click. The sound of Maya's shudder was mechanical and precise, but in the sudden silence following the gunshot, it sounded like a thunderclap. The echo bounced off the brick walls. One of the guards whipped his head around, scanning the darkness. He shouted, "Over there! Behind the bins!" Maya's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She yanked the camera down, clutching it to her chest, and bolted. She scrambled back the way she had come, her boots slipping on the slick cobblestones. Behind her, she heard heavy footsteps pounding against the pavement, fast and gaining. "Get her!" a voice roared. Maya took a sharp left, diving into an alleyway behind a row of shuttered shops. She knew these streets, or she thought she did. She needed to get to the main avenue where there would be traffic, cameras, witnesses. She sprinted past overflowing trash cans and stacks of wooden pallets, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The footsteps behind her were heavy, but there was only one set now. The other man must have flanked her. She saw a gap between a liquor store and an old repair shop, a narrow passage that should have led to the next street. She threw herself into it. Running blind, she skidded to a halt. A chain-link fence, topped with razor wire, blocked the end of the alley. It was new. It had not been there last month. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. She spun around to run back, but a shadow detached itself from the gloom at the mouth of the alley. It was not one of the guards. It was the man in the suit. He walked toward her slowly, unhurried, as if he were strolling through a park rather than cornering a witness in a dead-end alley at 3 a.m. The dim light from the street behind him caught the sharp angle of his jaw and the hollow of his cheek. He was terrifyingly handsome, in a way that made looking at him feel like staring into the sun. Maya backed up until her spine hit the cold, rough brick of the liquor store wall. There was nowhere to go. She gripped her camera so hard her knuckles turned white. He stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough that she could smell him. He did not smell like blood or gunpowder. He smelled of expensive cologne, sandalwood and bergamot, and the faint, lingering scent of clove cigarettes. His eyes were dark, almost black in this light, and they were completely devoid of fear or anger. They were calm, calculated. "Give me the camera," he said. His voice was a rich baritone, steady and commanding. Maya shook her head. Her body was trembling, betraying her terror, but her chin lifted in defiance. She had fought too hard for everything she had to just hand it over. He took a step closer. The space between them vanished. He was tall, looming over her, his presence suffocating. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, a stark contrast to the chill of the night. Maya pressed herself flatter against the brick, her breath hitching in her throat. She tried to summon a voice that sounded brave. "If you touch me, I will scream," she stammered. It was a childish threat, a desperate one. In this part of the city, screams were just background noise. People learned to turn up their televisions to drown them out. The man paused. He tilted his head slightly, studying her face as if she were a piece of abstract art he was trying to decipher. He looked at her wide, amber eyes, her parted lips, the pulse fluttering frantically in her throat. A slow, lazy smirk curled the corner of his mouth. It was not a smile. It was a challenge. He leaned in, lowering his head until his lips were inches from her ear. "Then let the city hear," he murmured. He raised his hand. Maya flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, expecting a blow, but the blow never came. She felt the warmth of his palm rest against the brick wall right beside her head, boxing her in. She felt the ghost of his other hand, his fingers barely brushing the strap of her camera where it rested on her shoulder. He did not grab it. He just traced the nylon weave, a gesture that was somehow more possessive than if he had seized her by the throat. Maya opened her eyes. He was staring at her, his smirk fading into a look of intense curiosity. "You have fire," he said softly. "Most people would be begging for their lives right now." "I am not most people," Maya whispered, though her voice shook. Clearly, he replied. Heavy footsteps approached the alley entrance. 2 men appeared, winded and angry. One of them had his gun drawn. "Boss?" The guard panted. "We should handle this. Give us the girl." The man in the suit did not look away from Maya. He kept his gaze locked on hers, holding her prisoner with nothing but his eyes. "No," he said simply. The guard hesitated. "Boss, she saw everything. She is coming with us," the man said. He finally pulled back, stepping away from her personal space, leaving Maya suddenly cold. He gestured toward the mouth of the alley. "You just volunteered for an interview. Miss..." He waited. "Collins," she said automatically, before her brain could tell her to lie. "Maya Collins. Miss Collins." He finished. "You are going to explain to me exactly why you were stupid enough to be here, and who exactly is going to miss you if you do not come home tonight." He turned and walked away, expecting her to follow. One of the guards stepped forward, grabbing Maya's arm roughly. Move! Maya jerked her arm away. I can walk, she snapped. She clutched her camera tighter and followed the man in the suit. She had the evidence. She had the photos. But as she walked toward the idling black SUV at the end of the block, she realized with a sinking dread that the photos were no longer her insurance. They were her death warrant. The drive took 20 minutes. Maya sat in the back seat of the leather-upholstered SUV. The man, Adrian Viscari, she now knew because she had seen his face on the news, usually accompanying headlines about dropped charges and insufficient evidence, sat next to her. He did not speak. He spent the entire ride typing on a secure phone, ignoring her completely. But every time the car turned a corner and Maya shifted in her seat, she felt his awareness of her. It was like sitting next to a tiger that was currently full, but could decide to be hungry at any moment. The car descended into a private underground garage beneath one of the tallest glass towers in the financial district. They took a private elevator that opened directly into the penthouse. The doors slid open, and Maya stepped out into a world that was diametrically opposed to the alley she had just left. The floors were polished dark wood. The walls were lined with modern art that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. One entire side of the room was floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of Harbor City. From up here, the city looked peaceful. The neon signs were just jewels scattered on velvet. The grime and the blood were invisible. "Sit," Adrian commanded. He pointed to a stool at a massive marble kitchen island. The kitchen was pristine, looking as if no one had ever actually cooked in it. Maya sat. She placed her camera on the counter, keeping her hand on top of it. Adrian walked to a sideboard and poured himself a glass of amber liquid. He did not offer her one. He took a sip, then turned to face her, leaning his hips against the counter. "Show me," he said. Maya hesitated. Adrian sighed, a sound of impatience. "Miss Collins, if I wanted to take it from you, I would have taken it. If I wanted you dead, you would be back in that alley. Show me the photos." With trembling fingers, Maya turned the camera around and pressed the playback button. Adrian leaned over the counter. He was close again. His sleeve, made of fine Italian wool, brushed against her bare forearm. He did not pull away. The contact was light, accidental, but it sent a jolt of electricity straight up her arm. He scrolled through the images, the fire, the firefighter, the street lamp, the execution. He paused on the image of the gun firing. He stared at it for a long time. "Good composition," he remarked dryly. "You have a steady hand. I want to know why," Maya said, her voice finding a shred of strength. "Why did you kill him?" Adrian straightened up, looking down at her. "Because he was selling fentanyl to high school students in my territory after I expressly forbade it." Maya blinked. She had expected a denial or a threat. Not an answer. "He was a poison," Adrian said coldly. "I removed him. You might call it murder. I call it sanitation. It is still a crime," Maya said. "And you are a witness," Adrian countered. He walked around the island until he was standing directly behind her stool. Maya stiffened. She could feel him there, a dark, heavy presence at her back. "Who do you work for?" he asked. "The Harbor Independent," she said. He scoffed. "That blog? They barely make payroll. They print the truth," Maya said defensively. "Truth does not pay the rent," Adrian said. He moved closer. Maya saw his reflection in the black glass of her camera screen. He was looking at the back of her head, his expression unreadable. "Tell me about your family." "Maya, it is just me." She lied. He reached out, his hand hovering near her shoulder again. "Do not lie to me. My men have your wallet. They have your ID. By now. They have run your name. Who is Liam?" The name hit her like a physical blow. Maya spun around on the stool, her eyes blazing. "Leave him out of this." "Who is he?" Adrian asked, his voice hardening. "He is my brother," Maya snapped. "And he has nothing to do with this." Adrian studied her face. He saw the shift in her. The fear was still there, but it had changed flavor. It was no longer fear for herself. It was protective fury. "Is he the reason you are walking through the docks at 2 a.m. looking for a paycheck?" Adrian asked. Maya looked down at her hands. She was not going to give him the satisfaction of a sob story. "He's sick," she said quietly. "He needs a kidney transplant. The list is long. The medication to keep him stable until a donor is found costs more than I make in a month. And the insurance?" Maya gave a bitter laugh. "We do not have insurance. Not the kind that covers this." Adrian was silent for a moment. He took another sip of his drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass. He looked at the camera sitting on the marble. Then he looked at Maya. He saw the fraying cuffs of her jacket, the exhaustion in her eyes, the desperate, fierce set of her jaw. "If I kill you," he said thoughtfully, speaking as if he were discussing the weather, "questions will be asked. The Independent is small but loud. You are the type of reporter who becomes a martyr. I do not need that kind of heat right now." He set his glass down. "But I cannot let you walk out of here with those photos." "I am not deleting them," Maya said. "It is my story." Adrian smirked again. But this time, it lacked the cruelty of the alley. It was almost impressed. "I have a proposition for you, Maya." He placed both hands on the counter, trapping her between his arms, though he did not touch her. "Delete the photos. Tonight, right now. In exchange, I will hire you." Maya stared at him. "Excuse me, I need a photographer," Adrian said. "Someone to document my legitimate business interests, charity galas, community outreach. I need to shape my public image. I need the city to see me as a benefactor, not a brute." "You want me to be your propaganda machine," Maya said, disgusted. "I want you to take pictures," Adrian corrected, "and in return, I will pay you double whatever that rag is paying you, and I will cover your brother's medical bills. All of them." Maya's breath caught in her throat. All of them. The surgery, the medication, the recovery. "I will have him seen by the best specialists in the state." Maya felt the room spin slightly. It was everything she had prayed for. It was Liam's life, handed to her on a silver platter. "And the cost?" she whispered. "You delete those photos," Adrian said, "and you belong to me. You work when I say. You go where I say. You keep your mouth shut about what you saw tonight, and you stay close, where I can see you." Maya looked at the camera. The image of the execution was still on the screen. It was the truth. It was justice. Then she thought of Liam, curled up on the couch under 3 blankets because they could not afford to turn up the heat. His skin pale and waxy. She felt nauseated. The bile rose in her throat. She looked up at Adrian. His eyes were waiting. He knew he had won. She hated him. She hated his expensive suit, his calm demeanor, and the way he bartered with human lives like they were poker chips. "Do I have a choice?" she asked. Adrian's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "No." Maya reached out with a hand that shook so badly she could barely control her fingers. She pressed the button. Delete image? Yes. She pressed it again, and again, and again. Adrian stood at her shoulder, watching every press of her finger. He was so close she could feel the warmth of his chest against her arm, his scent, clean soap, sharp cologne, and faint tobacco, burned into her nose, wiring itself into her memory alongside the shame of what she was doing. She deleted them all. The card was empty. She looked up at him, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. She refused to let them fall. "Done," she choked out. Adrian straightened up. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, black business card. He slid it across the marble toward her. "Be at the Meridian tomorrow night at 8. Dress well. We have work to do." The car ride home was a blur. The driver waited until she was inside her building before pulling away. Maya climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, her legs feeling like lead. She unlocked the door and stepped into the stale, cold air of the living room. Liam was asleep on the sagging beige couch. The TV was on, playing an infomercial for kitchen knives with the volume turned low. Maya walked over to him. He looked so young in his sleep, his face devoid of the pain that usually etched lines around his eyes. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair off his forehead. His skin was cool to the touch. She sank down onto the floor beside the couch, still clutching her camera bag. She looked out the window. From here, she could see the distant lights of the financial district towers, somewhere in one of those penthouses. Adrian Viscari was probably pouring another drink, satisfied with his night's work. Maya pulled her knees to her chest. She had saved Liam. She knew that, but as she looked at the city lights blurring through the grime of the window pane, she realized with a terrifying clarity that she had just sold her soul. She had stepped into the cage. She had let the monster close the door. And the worst part was, when he had leaned close to her in that alley, when he had whispered against her skin, she hadn't just felt fear, she had felt a spark. "Touch me, and I will scream." She closed her eyes, letting her head rest against the couch cushion. He hadn't touched her. Not really, but he had heard her. And now, the whole city felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The bass inside the meridian was not just a sound, it was a physical force. It vibrated through the floorboards, up the soles of Maya's boots, and settled deep in her chest, thumping in a rhythm that matched her racing heart. She stood at the edge of the VIP booth, clutching her camera like a shield. The club was a masterpiece of shadow and gold light, designed to make everyone inside look beautiful and dangerous. But the men sitting around the semicircular leather booth did not need lighting tricks to look dangerous. Adrian sat in the center. He wore a charcoal suit tonight, the top button of his shirt undone, looking deceptively relaxed. He swirled a glass of whiskey on his knee, his eyes scanning the room with the detached precision of a predator watching a herd. "Gentlemen," Adrian said, his voice cutting effortlessly through the music, "I want you to meet Maya Collins." He extended a hand without looking at her. It was a command. Maya stepped forward, her legs feeling stiff. She forced herself to look at the faces of the men. There were 4 of them. Scars, tattoos, expensive watches. They looked at her with a mix of boredom and suspicion. "She's our new media strategist," Adrian continued smoothly. One of the men, a heavy-set guy with a thick gold chain, snorted. "Strategist? She looks like she is 12. She's here to help us transition." Adrian said, "The city is changing. We are evolving. Maya is going to document our philanthropic efforts. She's going to make sure the public sees the legitimacy of our organization." He stood up then, moving to her side. He placed his hand on her shoulder, to an observer. It might have looked like a supportive gesture from a boss to a new employee, but Maya felt the weight of his grip. His fingers dug into the sensitive hollow above her collarbone, hard enough to bruise. A silent, painful warning. "Do not mess this up. Smile." "Maya," Adrian murmured, leaning close to her ear so only she could hear. "You are part of the family now." Maya forced the corners of her mouth up. It felt like her face might crack. "Hello," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I look forward to working with you." Adrian gave her shoulder a final, warning squeeze before releasing her. "Good. Now, get some shots of the room. Capture the energy. Make it look like the place to be." Maya retreated behind her lens. It was the only place she felt safe. As she snapped photos of the dancing crowd, the bartenders flaring bottles, and the light refracting off crystal glasses, she could feel Adrian's gaze on her back. It was heavy, possessive, and terrifyingly constant. The next 3 days were a surreal blur of cognitive dissonance. Maya expected to be photographing drug deals or backroom beatings. Instead, Adrian had her documenting the strangest paradox she had ever witnessed. On Tuesday, she stood in a community center in the Lower East Side, snapping photos of Adrian Viscari handing out turkeys and boxes of fresh produce to a line of families that stretched around the block. On Wednesday, she was at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new pediatric wing at St. Jude S., where a plaque bore the Viscari name. What unsettled her was not the charity itself. She knew criminals often laundered their reputations along with their money. It was the way the people looked at him. An old woman gripped Adrian's hand, kissing his knuckles, tears in her eyes as she thanked him for paying her heating bill. A group of teenagers high-fived him, calling him Mr. V, looking at him with undisguised awe. To them, he was not a monster. He was a king, a protector who stepped in where the city government had failed. Maya framed a shot of Adrian crouching down to talk to a little girl in a wheelchair. He was smiling. It was a genuine smile, soft around the edges, transforming his sharp features into something almost kind. Click. She lowered the camera, feeling a knot of confusion tighten in her stomach. She remembered the man in the alley, the gunshot, the cold indifference. How could both men exist in the same skin? Adrian looked up, catching her staring. The softness vanished instantly, replaced by that cool, unreadable mask. He nodded at her, a silent order to keep working. By Friday night, the exhaustion was wearing her thin. Adrian had ordered a private photo session on the rooftop of the Meridian. He needed headshots for a business profile in a local magazine, another layer of the legitimate businessman camouflage he was constructing. The rooftop was closed to the public. The wind whipped Maya's hair across her face as she adjusted her tripod. The view was breathtaking. Harbor City spread out below them, a grid of amber and white light. To the south, the massive structure of the city stadium glowed against the night sky. "Turn your head slightly to the left," Maya instructed. Adrian obeyed. He was leaning against the stone parapet, the wind ruffling his dark hair. He looked regal, untouchable. "Lift your chin," she said. He did. His eyes locked onto her lens. Suddenly, a loud boom echoed through the air, vibrating the rooftop beneath their feet. Maya gasped, flinching violently. The stadium nearby had set off a barrage of fireworks to celebrate a home team victory. At the exact same moment, the rooftop floodlights flickered and died, plunging them into near darkness, illuminated only by the rhythmic, exploding bursts of red and green fire in the sky. Disoriented by the flash and the noise, Maya took a step back. Her heel caught on a loose paving stone. She stumbled, her arms windmilling as she tipped dangerously close to the edge of the unrailed section of the roof. "Maya!" The name was a sharp bark. Before she could scream, a hand clamped around her elbow. Adrian yanked her forward with surprising strength. The momentum slammed her into his chest. Maya's hands instinctively came up to brace herself, landing flat against the fine wool of his coat. Underneath, she could feel the hard muscle of his chest, solid as a rock wall. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The fireworks exploded overhead, crack, boom, fizz, bathing them in strobe light flashes of color, in the red light. Adrian's face was sharp, intense. His other arm had come around her waist to steady her, his grip firm but careful. He wasn't crushing her, he was anchoring her. Maya's breath hitched. She could smell the clean scent of his soap and the faint, smoky aroma of the city that clung to him. She looked up, and he was looking down, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her knees feel like water. The air between them crackled, charged with something that wasn't just fear. It was the same electricity she had felt in the kitchen, but magnified by the adrenaline of the fall. Then the floodlights buzzed back to life, flooding the roof with harsh white illumination. The spell broke. Maya shoved him away, scrambling back until there were 3 feet of safety between them. Her cheeks burned. "I am fine," she snapped, smoothing her jacket. Adrian's hands remained suspended in the air for a second before he dropped them to his sides. "I saved you from falling. Miss Collins, you are welcome." "I did not ask you to catch me," she retorted, her voice shaking more than she wanted it to. "Do not act like my savior, Adrian. We both know what you are." Adrian's expression hardened. He adjusted his cuffs, the moment of vulnerability locked away behind steel doors. "Pack up," he said coldly. "We are done here." The argument spilled over into his office 10 minutes later. Maya was shoving her lenses into her bag, her movements jerky and angry. Adrian stood behind his desk, pouring a drink. "You think because you buy a few turkeys and smile at grandmothers that it washes off?" Maya accused, not looking at him. "You are buying their loyalty with blood money. Every dollar you donate has a body count attached to it." Adrian slammed his glass down on the desk. Liquid splashed over the rim. "Stop being naive. Maya, do you think the city council is clean? Do you think the developers building those condos downtown are saints? Everyone buys loyalty. I am just honest about the price." "Honest?" Maya spun around. "You executed a man in the street, and I paid for your brother's dialysis this morning," Adrian roared back. The words hung in the silence. Maya froze. She felt the blood drain from her face. "That is right," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal timbre. He walked around the desk, stalking toward her. "The hospital called my accountant. The transfer was made. $5,000 for 1 week of treatment." He stopped directly in front of her. He was so close she had to crane her neck to look him in the eye. "Your high and mighty truth," he hissed. "Did it ever pay a single one of those bills? Did your principals keep Liam warm at night? Or did they just let him rot on a waiting list while you played reporter?" Maya opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The truth of his words cut deeper than any knife. He was right. Her integrity had been useless to Liam. His crime was saving his life. Tears of frustration pricked her eyes. She hated him for it. She hated that he was right. She glared up at him, refusing to back down. They stood chest to chest, the tension spiraling into a thick, suffocating heat. It was anger. Yes, but it was tangled with something else. The raw, volatile chemistry of two people who saw the darkest parts of each other and refused to look away. Adrian's gaze dropped to her mouth. His breathing was heavy, matching hers. Then, abruptly, he stepped back. He turned his back on her, walking to the window. "Go home," he said. His voice was ice cold. "Remember who you work for, Maya. And remember who keeps your brother alive." Maya grabbed her bag. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to throw something. Instead, she turned for the door. "I hate hospitals," she whispered, her hand on the doorknob. Adrian did not turn around. "What?" "I was terrified of them as a child," she said, her voice trembling. "My mother died in one. That is why I need help with Liam. I can't handle the doctors. The smell." She looked at his reflection in the window. For a split second, the hardness in his face fractured. His eyes, reflected in the glass, softened. He looked sorry. Then he blinked, and the look was gone. "Good night, Miss Collins." The next afternoon, the reality of her new life crashed into the mundane world she tried to keep separate. Maya was leaving a convenience store 3 blocks from her apartment, carrying a carton of milk and a loaf of bread. She was distracted, checking her phone, when 2 men stepped into her path. She sidestepped, muttering an apology. They stepped with her. Maya looked up. They were young, wearing leather jackets with a blue serpent emblem stitched on the collars. The North Side crew. Rivals. "Well, look who it is," one of them sneered. He had a gold tooth and eyes that looked glazed. "You are the girl from the Meridian, the one taking pictures of Vescari." Maya's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I am just a photographer. I do not know anything." The second man crowded her, backing her until she hit the plate glass window of the store. He reached out and tugged the strap of her camera bag. "Maybe we should see what kind of pictures you take," he said. "Maybe Vescari would pay to get this camera back, or maybe he would pay to get you back." Panic, sharp and blinding, flooded Maya's system. It was the alley all over again, the proximity of violence, the helplessness. "Don't touch me," she shouted, trying to shove past them. The man grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "You are not going anywhere, sweetheart. Screech." The sound of tires locking on asphalt tore through the air. A black sedan mounted the curb, missing a fire hydrant by inches. The doors flew open before the car even fully stopped. 2 of Adrian's security guards burst out, guns already drawn but held low. "Back off," one of them shouted. The rivals hesitated, looking at the guns. Then Adrian stepped out of the back seat. He did not have a gun. He did not shout. He simply adjusted his cufflinks and walked toward them. His face was a mask of terrifying calm. "I believe," Adrian said, his voice low and smooth, "that you are bothering my employee." The man holding Maya let go as if her arm had turned into red-hot iron. "Vescari," the rival stammered. We didn't know she was with you." "She is with me," Adrian said. He stepped between Maya and the thug. He turned his back on the threat, placing his body directly in the line of fire to shield her. He looked down at Maya. His shoulders were tense under his tailored coat, a rigid wall of protection. "Did they hurt you?" he asked. His voice was clipped, tight. Maya shook her head, too shaken to speak. She was trembling violently. Adrian's eyes scanned her face, her throat, her wrists. He was looking for bruises. He was looking for blood. When he found none, a fraction of the tension left his jaw. "Get in the car," he ordered softly. He turned back to the rivals. "If I see you on this street again, or if you ever look at her again, I will burn this entire block to the ground. Do you understand?" They nodded, terrified, and scrambled away. The car ride back to the Meridian was silent. The air conditioning was humming, but Maya couldn't stop shivering. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her cold and nauseous. She sat in the back seat, staring at her hands in her lap. They were shaking so hard her knuckles were knocking together. Adrian sat next to her. He didn't speak. He didn't offer empty platitudes. Slowly, he reached across the leather seat. Maya held her breath, expecting him to touch her arm or her hand. Instead, his long fingers curled around the lens of her camera where it rested on her lap. He gripped the metal housing of the camera, his hand covering hers without actually touching her skin. He held it firm, steadying it. Maya stared at his hand. It was a scarred hand, dangerous and capable of violence, but in this moment it was an anchor. He was steadying the camera because he knew it was the extension of her. He was trying, in his own warped, emotionally stunted way, to calm her down without crossing the line she had drawn. Maya let out a shaky breath. She watched his thumb rub slow, soothing circles against the rubber grip of the zoom lens. "Thank you," she whispered. Adrian didn't look at her. He just stared straight ahead at the road, his jaw set. But he didn't let go of the camera until they pulled into the garage. Up in the office, the dam finally broke. Adrian had poured her a glass of water and set it on the desk. Maya stood there, staring at it. And suddenly the image of Liam's face popped into her mind. The transplant list, the rivals, the guns. It was too much. "I can't do this," she choked out. She leaned forward, bracing her hands on the heavy mahogany desk, and sobbed. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was ugly, ragged gasps that tore through her chest. "Liam. He can't afford another scare." She wept. "If something happens to me, if they come for him." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. She heard Adrian's footsteps on the plush carpet. He walked around the desk. He stopped beside her. Maya tensed, waiting for him to tell her to stop crying, to tell her to toughen up. He didn't. He stood close, his presence a warm, radiating heat at her side. He hesitated. She could feel him hovering. Then she felt his hand. He placed it carefully, deliberately, right between her shoulder blades. It wasn't a grab. It wasn't a push. It was a solid, heavy weight, a grounding touch. He held his hand there, pressing firmly, as if he could physically hold her pieces together. "Breathe, Maya," he said quietly. She leaned into the touch, starved for comfort. She cried until the tears ran dry, grounded by the heat of his palm against her spine. Slowly, the sobs subsided into sniffles. Maya lifted her head. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked up. Adrian was right there. He hadn't moved. His face was closer than she had ever seen it. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. She could see the faint scar that cut through his eyebrow. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice hoarse. Adrian looked at her. His gaze dropped to her wet cheek. Slowly, almost as if he couldn't stop himself, he lifted his hand from her back. He reached up. His thumb brushed the last tear from her cheekbone. His skin was rough, warm, and electric. Maya's breath caught. She went perfectly still. He cupped her face, his fingers sliding into the hair at her temple. He tilted her head back slightly. They were breathing the same air. The scent of him, clove and sandalwood, filled her senses. He looked at her mouth. His pupils were blown wide. The controlled tension in his jaw jumped. Maya felt a pull in her chest, a terrifying, magnetic desire to lean forward, to close the inch of space between them. She wanted him to kiss her. God help her. She wanted the monster to kiss her. Adrian leaned in. His eyelids fluttered shut. Then he froze. A shudder went through him. He opened his eyes, and the steel walls slammed back into place. He stepped back abruptly, his hand falling from her face. "Go home to your brother, Maya," he said, his voice rough, like gravel grinding together. He turned away from her, walking to the window, putting the width of the room between them. Maya stood there, her skin still burning where he had touched her. She felt bereft, cold. She grabbed her bag and fled the office, her heart pounding not with fear this time, but with a confusion that was infinitely more dangerous. She was falling, and she wasn't sure if Adrian Viscari would catch her again, or if he would be the ground that broke her. The fluorescent lights of the dialysis clinic hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency that Maya had come to associate with the smell of antiseptic and despair. She adjusted the strap of her camera bag on her shoulder, watching through the glass doors as a nurse settled Liam into his chair. He looked paler today, the dark circles under his eyes standing out starkly against the white pillow. But he had smiled at her and told her to go work. Maya pushed through the double doors and stepped out into the biting wind of a harbor city afternoon. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, threatening a storm that had been brewing off the coast for 2 days. She turned to head toward the subway, but a figure blocked her path. Miss Collins. It was not a question. The man was in his 40s, wearing a suit that was too generic to be anything other than government issue. He had a face that was forgettable, except for his eyes, which were sharp and devoid of warmth. Maya stopped, her heart giving a single, hard thump against her ribs. "Can I help you?" "Agent Delaney. Federal Bureau of Investigation," he said, flashing a badge with practiced ease before tucking it away. "I was hoping we could have a quick chat." "I am in a hurry," Maya said, sidestepping. "It concerns your new employer," Delaney said. His voice was casual, but it stopped her cold. "And the events near the docks 3 weeks ago." Maya froze. She turned back slowly to face him. "I work for a nightclub. I take pictures of parties. I do not know what you're talking about." Delaney smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Of course. You are just a photographer. And Adrian Viscari is just a philanthropist who pays for kidney treatments out of the kindness of his heart." The mention of the treatment felt like a physical violation. Maya gripped her bag tighter. "My brother's medical history is private. Nothing is private in this city." "Maya," Delaney said, taking a step closer, "you are swimming with sharks, and you are bleeding. We know you were there that night. We know what you saw. Viscari is using you. He is wrapping you up in his little legitimate facade. But when the hammer drops, and it will drop, he will use you as a shield." He reached into his pocket and slid a plain white card into the front pocket of her denim jacket. "When you realize you are in over your head, call me. We can help you. We can help your brother. But only if you come to us before the body count gets higher." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of commuters, leaving Maya standing on the sidewalk, the white card burning a hole through the fabric of her jacket. That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face. Liam was asleep in the other room. She'd created a hidden folder on her hard drive, buried beneath layers of system files and innocuous wedding photos. Into it, she dragged the files from her camera. They were not incriminating photos. Adrian had made sure of that. But they were details, timestamps of meetings, photos of license plates in the background of charity events, notes she had typed up about who Adrian spoke to and when. It was a safety net. Or maybe it was a betrayal. She wasn't sure anymore. Guilt gnawed at her stomach. Adrian had kept his word. Liam's treatment was paid for. The doctors were optimistic for the first time in years. Adrian treated her with a strange, distant respect, but Delaney's voice echoed in her head. "He will use you as a shield." She closed the laptop abruptly when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian. Downstairs. 5 minutes. Maya grabbed her camera. She told herself she was just doing her job. She told herself she was surviving. But as she went downstairs to the waiting black car, she checked to make sure the FBI agent's card was hidden deep inside her wallet. Terrified that Adrian might somehow see it through the leather. The destination was not the Meridian. The driver took them out to the industrial outskirts, past the shipyard, and into a desolate area of rusted warehouses and overgrown lots. Adrian sat beside her in the back, silent as usual. He was reading a file, his brow furrowed in concentration. When the car stopped, he closed the folder and looked at her. "Bring your camera," he said. Maya followed him into the warehouse. The space was cavernous, lit by hanging halogen bulbs that cast long, harsh shadows. The air smelled of dust and old iron. In the center of the room, 3 of Adrian's men stood around a wooden chair. A man was zip-tied to it. He was young, sporting a frantic, sweaty desperation. Maya stopped, her instinct to flee rising in her throat. "Adrian, I do not want to see this." "You need to understand the business, Maya," Adrian said calmly, unbuttoning his suit jacket and handing it to one of his guards. "You think I am a monster. I want you to see the alternative." He walked toward the man in the chair. "This is Russo," Adrian said, his voice echoing in the empty space. Russo thought it would be profitable to sell methamphetamines to high school students, specifically to the kids at St. Jude S., 3 blocks from where my mother used to go to church. The man in the chair wept. "Boss, please. I needed the money. I did not know." "I told you," Adrian said, rolling up his pristine white shirt sleeves to the elbow. "No kids. That is the rule. We destroy lives, Russo, but we do not touch the children. That is the line between business and savagery." Adrian nodded to his men. One of them stepped forward and grabbed Russo's right hand, forcing it flat onto a small wooden table next to the chair. Maya raised her camera. She didn't want to, but Adrian's gaze flicked to her, commanding. "Record this," he said, "so the others know I keep my word." He picked up a heavy metal baton from the table. Russo screamed before the blow even landed. Maya flinched, but she didn't look away. She snapped the shutter just as Adrian brought the baton down. There was a sickening, wet crunch of bone shattering. Russo's scream tore through the warehouse, raw and agonizing. Adrian dropped the baton. He didn't look happy. He didn't look sadistic. He looked tired. He looked like a man taking out the garbage. He walked over to Russo, who was hyperventilating, and leaned down. "You are out," Adrian said quietly. "You leave the city tonight. If I see you again, I will not aim for the hand." Adrian turned and walked back to Maya. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped a speck of dust from his shirt. Maya lowered her camera. Her hands were shaking. She looked at him with a mixture of horror and a grudging, confused respect. He was brutal, yes, but there was a code, a twisted, violent morality that separated him from the chaos of the streets. "Did you get the shot?" he asked. Maya nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, good," Adrian said. "Let's go. It is going to storm." The sky broke open as they drove back to the city. By the time they reached the meridian, the rain was coming down in sheets so thick it looked like a solid gray wall. The wind howled through the streets, knocking over trash cans and sending debris flying. The streets around the club were flooding. The water was already rising past the curbs, black and swirling. "You cannot drive home in this," Adrian said as they entered the private elevator. "The lower roads will be washed out. I have to get to Liam," Maya insisted, wringing water from her hair. "Liam is fine. I have a nurse with him tonight, remember?" Adrian said. "You are staying here." Maya started to argue, but a crack of thunder shook the building, vibrating through the elevator shaft. She slumped against the wall. She knew he was right. The club was empty. It was Monday, and they had closed early due to the weather warnings. The silence in the usually thumping hallways was eerie. Adrian led her up past the offices to the top floor, where the guest suites were located. The hallway was dim, lit only by low, recessed lights. The sound of the rain battering the roof was a constant, heavy roar. He unlocked a door and pushed it open. The suite was beautiful, decorated in dark blues and grays. But the moment they stepped inside, the lights flickered, buzzed, and died. "Great," Adrian muttered in the darkness. He used the flashlight on his phone to find a lighter and moved around the room, lighting 3 large pillar candles on the mantel. The soft, golden glow filled the space, chasing away the shadows but making the room feel intimately small. Maya stood near the door, hugging herself. She felt exposed in the sudden quiet. Adrian took off his tie, draping it over a chair. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like a weary man. He moved to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. "I wanted to be an architect," he said suddenly. Maya blinked, surprised by the admission. "What, when I was 20? Adrian said, his back to her. "I was accepted into a program in Chicago. I wanted to build things. Skyscrapers, libraries, something that would last." "What happened?" Maya asked, taking a step closer. "My father was shot," he said simply. "My uncle took over, but he was weak. The territory began to crumble. Other families moved in. The bodies started piling up. My mother begged me to come back. She said the name Vescari meant something, and I had to protect it." He turned to look at her. The candlelight danced in his dark eyes, softening the sharp angles of his face. "I came back. I saved the territory, and I burned my acceptance letter." Maya looked at him, seeing the tragedy beneath the power. "You hate it," she whispered. "I am good at it," he corrected. "But yes, sometimes." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "What about you, Maya? What do you hate?" "I hate this city," she said, her voice trembling. "I hate that it chews people up. I hate that good people like my parents worked themselves to death and still left us with nothing. I hate that I have to rely on a man like you to save my brother, because the system doesn't care if he lives or dies." The words hung between them, heavy and true. Adrian walked toward her. He moved slowly, giving her time to back away. She didn't. "You think I am a monster because I have blood on my hands," he said softly, stopping 2 feet away. "I saw you break a man's hand an hour ago," Maya challenged, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "And I saw you watch," he countered. "You did not look away." He took another step. The heat coming off him was palpable. It wrapped around her, smelling of rain and musk. Maya looked up at him. She wanted to push him away. She wanted to run, but the pull was too strong. It was the same gravity that had drawn her to him in the alley, the same dangerous spark. Adrian raised his hand. Maya's breath hitched, but she didn't flinch. He reached out and slowly, with agonizing care, tucked a loose strand of damp hair behind her ear. His knuckles grazed the sensitive skin of her jaw. Maya's eyes fluttered shut. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, loud enough that she was sure he could hear it. "Why are you still here, Maya?" he whispered, his voice rough. "You could have run. You could have gone to the police. You know why?" she breathed, opening her eyes. Adrian stared at her mouth. His hand lingered on her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. His touch was firm, possessive, yet terrified, as if he expected her to shatter. Maya felt her control snapping, the fear, the adrenaline from the warehouse, the intimacy of the storm. It all collided in her chest. She curled her hands into the fabric of her own shirt to stop herself from reaching for him. "Adrian," she whispered. A warning or a plea. She wasn't sure. He leaned down. His forehead rested against hers for a second, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her skin. "Tell me to stop, and I will walk out that door." Maya looked into his eyes. She saw the darkness there, but she also saw the loneliness. She saw the man who wanted to build skyscrapers, trapped in a cage of his own making. "Don't stop," she whispered. Adrian let out a low groan, a sound of surrendered control. He closed the small distance between them and captured her lips. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It was the taste of pent-up longing and days of silent arguments. Adrian's mouth was hot and demanding, and Maya met him with equal force, her hands finally flying up to grip the lapels of his shirt, pulling him closer. Adrian's hands moved to her waist, gripping her hips firmly. He pressed her back a step, then another, until her legs hit the edge of the mattress. He broke the kiss, pulling back just an inch to look at her. His eyes were blown wide, searching hers for any sign of hesitation. "Maya?" he rasped. "Yes," she answered, breathless. He guided her down onto the bed, the movement fluid and careful. He followed her, his body hovering over hers, supporting his weight on his forearms so he wouldn't crush her. He slowed down then. He treated her like she was something precious, something he hadn't earned. His hand moved from her waist to her shoulder, then down her arm, his fingers trailing fire across her skin. He watched her face, mapping every shiver, every hitch of her breath. "Is this okay?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Maya reached up, threading her fingers through his dark hair, pulling him down. "Yes." He kissed the hollow of her throat, making her gasp. He interlaced his fingers with hers, pinning her hand gently to the pillow. The gesture was grounding, connecting them amidst the storm raging outside. In the flickering candlelight, the lines between photographer and subject, boss and employee, monster and savior dissolved. There was only the heat of his skin, the weight of his body, and the desperate, terrifying realization that she wasn't just surviving him anymore. She was falling in love with him. The storm broke sometime before dawn. Maya woke to the feeling of warmth and sunlight hitting her face. She blinked her eyes open, disoriented for a moment by the high ceilings and the unfamiliar room. Then the memories of the night rushed back, bringing a flush to her skin. She turned her head. Adrian was asleep beside her. He was lying on his stomach, one arm thrown heavy and protective over her waist, holding her close to him even in sleep. His face was relaxed, the usual lines of tension smoothed away. He looked younger. He looked peaceful. Maya felt a swell of affection so strong it made her chest ache. She carefully lifted his arm, sliding out from under his weight without waking him. She needed water. She sat up, wrapping the sheet around herself, and swung her legs over the edge of the bed. Her eyes landed on the nightstand on Adrian's side of the bed. There was a manila folder sitting there. It must have been the file he was reading in the car, the one he had brought in and set down before the lights went out. The file was slightly open. Maya saw her own name typed at the top of the visible page. Subject: Maya Collins. Curiosity, cold and sharp, pricked her. She glanced at Adrian. He was still sound asleep, his breathing deep and even. Maya reached out and carefully opened the folder. Her blood turned to ice. It wasn't a personnel file. It was a surveillance log. There were photos of her walking into the grocery store 2 days ago, photos of her sitting on a park bench, photos of her entering the dialysis clinic. There were notes in Adrian's handwriting in the margins. Tuesday, 14 o'clock, meets with landlord, paid cash. Wednesday, 9 o'clock, doctor. Evan's consultation regarding Liam. Prognosis consistent with report. Thursday, 18:30, path home deviates. Checking for tails? Maya stared at the papers, her hand trembling. He hadn't just been protecting her. He had been tracking her. Every step, every moment she thought she was alone, his shadow had been there. She looked at the photo of her and Liam laughing outside the clinic. It was taken from a distance, through a telephoto lens, the tenderness of the night before, the feeling of safety, shattered like glass. The arm that had felt protective a moment ago now felt like a shackle. He knew everything. He owned every part of her life. Maya looked back at the sleeping man. The sunlight caught the curve of his shoulder, the same shoulder she had kissed hours ago. She felt sick. She carefully closed the file and placed it back exactly as it had been. She pulled her hand back, clutching the sheet to her chest. The city outside was quiet, washed clean by the storm, but inside the room, the air was suddenly suffocating. Maya realized then that the cage wasn't locked. It was worse. The cage was comfortable, and she had walked right into it, laid down and gone to sleep. And now? She didn't know if she could ever leave. The manila folder hit the mahogany desk with a sound that was less like a slap and more like a gunshot. It slid across the polished surface, scattering a stack of invoices before coming to rest inches from Adrian's hand. Adrian did not flinch. He sat in his leather chair, the morning light from the floor-to-ceiling windows casting long, sharp shadows across his face. He looked at the folder, then slowly raised his eyes to meet Maya's. "You have been tracking me," Maya said. Her voice was not loud, but it trembled with a rage so cold it made her entire body shake. "You have photos of me at the grocery store, notes on my doctor appointments. You even knew what time I left my apartment on Tuesdays." Adrian picked up his glass of water and took a slow, deliberate sip. "I told you. Maya, I keep my eyes on the things that matter to me." "I am not a thing," she shouted, the control finally snapping. "I am a person. I am the woman who slept in your bed last night, and the whole time, you had a file on me right there on the nightstand like I was just another asset to be managed." Adrian set the glass down. He stood up, his movements fluid and unhurried, and walked around the desk. "You are being naive," he said calmly. "Do you think you can walk into my world, sleep in my bed, and still live a normal private life? My enemies know your face. Maya, they know your name. Knowing where you are is the only way I can ensure you are not bleeding out in a ditch somewhere." The justification felt like a physical weight settling on her shoulders, heavy and suffocating. It was another cage, gilded with the promise of safety but barred nonetheless. "So that is it?" Maya asked, stepping back as he approached. "I am just a project to you, something to be watched and guarded and managed." "You are not a project," Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You are a liability that I chose to accept." "A liability," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. "You knew who I was from the first moment we met in that alley," Adrian fired back, his calm facade cracking to reveal the frustration beneath. "You saw me put a bullet in a man. You saw me break a hand yesterday, and yet, last night, you pulled me into that bed. You chose this. Maya, you do not get to act surprised that I am a monster now. I thought you were different with me," she whispered, the hurt bleeding through the anger. "I thought we were real." "We are real," Adrian growled. He closed the distance, crowding her against the edge of the desk. They stood chest to chest, the air between them thick with unsaid things. Maya looked up at him, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to kiss him. The confusion was a knot in her chest that she couldn't untangle. "Then leave," Adrian whispered hoarsely, his eyes searching hers. "If the cage is too tight, walk out the door. I will not stop you." Maya stared at him. She saw the challenge in his eyes, but also the flicker of fear, the fear that she actually would go. "I can't breathe here," she said. She turned on her heel and stormed out of the office, the heavy door slamming shut behind her, cutting off the sight of him standing alone in the center of his empire. The meeting took place an hour later in a diner on the outskirts of the city, a place with cracked vinyl seats and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Agent Delaney sat opposite her, looking out of place in his gray suit. He didn't smile when she sat down. "He knows everything," Maya said, staring at her hands. "He has been tracking me." Delaney nodded, unsurprised. That is what men like Vascari do. Control is their currency. If they cannot control you, they destroy you. Or they get you killed by negligence. "I want out," Maya said, "but I can't leave Liam. Adrian is paying for everything if I leave." "If you leave, the money stops," Delaney finished, "and your brother is back on the wait list at the county hospital." Maya didn't answer. She didn't have to. The reality was a gun to her head. "We can help you," Delaney said, leaning forward. "We can relocate you, both of you. We can get Liam into a specialist facility in Boston, federal protection, new identities, a fresh start where nobody knows the name Vascari." Maya looked up, hope warring with skepticism. "And the price?" "You wear a wire," Delaney said. Maya recoiled. "No, he would find it." "He won't," Delaney assured her. "The tech is paper thin. We tape it to your torso. We need concrete evidence. Maya, not just photos of him shaking hands. We need audio. We need him discussing the shipments. We need him talking about the judges he owns." Maya looked out the window. It was raining again. She thought of Adrian's hand on her back. She thought of the way he had steadied her camera. She thought of the file on the nightstand. "I have conditions," she said, her voice steady. Delaney raised an eyebrow. "I am listening." "No bloodshed," she said. "If you move in, you do it when there are no civilians around. I will not be responsible for a crossfire." "Agreed. And," she continued, taking a deep breath, "you offer him a deal." Delaney laughed, a short, sharp sound. "A deal? For Adrian Vascari? He is not the only problem," Maya said intensely. "There is a rot in this city that goes deeper than him. There are councilmen. There is Victor Hale. Adrian hates them as much as you do. If he helps you take down the corrupt officials in Hale's syndicate, you give him a way out. Delaney studied her for a long moment. You still care about him, even after he stalked you. Just tell me if you can do it, Maya snapped. Delaney drummed his fingers on the table. If he gives us Hale and the dirty politicians, I can talk to the prosecutor. I can't promise immunity, but I can promise a chance. Maya closed her eyes. It was the best she was going to get. Do it, she whispered. The dinner that evening was a torture session disguised as a social engagement. It was held at a private room in one of Harbor City's most exclusive steakhouses. The guests were 2 city councilmen and the deputy mayor. The air smelled of cigar smoke and roasting meat. Maya sat next to Adrian. She was wearing a high-necked black dress that concealed the thin, terrified beat of her heart. And beneath it, the recording device taped to her ribcage, the adhesive itched, a constant stinging reminder of her betrayal. Adrian was charming. He laughed at the councilman's bad jokes, poured wine, and discussed zoning laws with a smooth, predatory grace. But Maya could feel the tension radiating off him. He was still angry about the morning. He barely looked at her, but his physical presence was overwhelming. Get a shot of the deputy mayor shaking my hand, Adrian murmured, leaning close to her ear. His breath against her skin sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Maya lifted her camera, her hands trembling slightly. Click, under the table. Adrian's knee brushed against hers. He didn't pull away. The contact was electric, searing through the fabric of her dress. Maya felt a wave of nausea. Every smile she faked, every photo she took, every second she sat there. The device against her skin was capturing his voice. She was recording the evidence that would put him in a cage far worse than the one she had accused him of building for her. He reached for the wine bottle to refill her glass. Maya, distracted by her own guilt, moved her hand too quickly. Her fingers knocked against the stem of her wine glass. The crystal goblet tipped before it could shatter. Adrian's hand shot out. He caught the glass by the bowl, righting it without spilling a drop, in the same motion. His other hand covered hers where it rested on the white tablecloth, steadying her. Careful, he said softly. He squeezed her hand. It was an instinctive gesture of comfort, automatic and protective. Maya looked at him. For a second, the mask slipped. She saw the worry in his eyes. He wasn't thinking about the councilman. He was wondering why she was so jumpy. I am sorry, she stammered, pulling her hand away as if he had burned her. I am just tired. Adrian stared at her for a moment longer, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then he turned back to the deputy mayor, the mask sliding back into place. The ride back to the penthouse was silent. When they entered the main living area, Adrian did not go to the bar as he usually did. He stood in the center of the room, unbuttoning his cuffs, and watched her. Something is wrong, he said. Maya froze halfway to the hallway. I told you, I am tired. We fought this morning. Adrian, I am still upset. It is not that, Adrian said. He walked toward her, circling her slowly like a shark inspecting a swimmer. You have been jumping at shadows all night. You couldn't look me in the eye at dinner. He stopped in front of her. His gaze dropped from her face to her throat, and then lower, lingering on the bodice of her dress. Maya stopped breathing. The wire was right there, taped just beneath her left breast. Could he see the outline? Could he sense the electronics? What are you looking for? She asked, forcing a tone of indignation. Betrayal, Adrian said softly. He reached out, his hand hovering over her chest. Maya forced herself to stand still, her heart hammering against the plastic device like a trapped bird. If he touched her there, if he felt the hard edge of the recorder, it was over. He would kill her, or worse. He would look at her with that disappointment that she was beginning to realize would hurt more than a bullet. Adrian's hand moved up. He brushed his knuckles against her collarbone, his eyes searching hers. Is there something you want to tell me? Maya, tell him. A voice in her head screamed. Tell him everything. Tell him about Delaney. Tell him about the deal. But she couldn't. If she told him, he would go to war. He would kill Delaney. And then the federal government would bring the full weight of their power down on him, and Liam would die in a county waiting room. "I just want to go to sleep," she whispered. Adrian studied her for a second longer, the suspicion warring with something else in his eyes. Longing, perhaps, or regret. He dropped his hand. "Go to bed," he said dismissively. "I have calls to make." Maya fled to the bedroom, locking the door behind her. She ripped the tape off her skin in the bathroom, suppressing a sob as the adhesive tore at her flesh, leaving a red, angry welt that looked exactly like what it was, a brand. 2 days passed in a blur of agonizing tension. Adrian was paranoid. He knew there was a leak. He had begun questioning his lieutenants in the basement of the Meridian, his voice echoing up through the vents. Maya stayed in the penthouse, editing photos, feeling like a prisoner in the ivory tower. On the 3rd evening, the air in the penthouse was heavy with impending rain. Adrian was standing on the balcony, smoking a cigarette, staring out at the city skyline. Maya stepped out to join him. She couldn't stand the distance anymore. The silence between them was louder than the city traffic. "Adrian," she said softly. He didn't turn around. "You should be inside. It is getting cold." She walked up to the railing and stood beside him. "I am not made of glass." Adrian flicked his cigarette over the edge, watching the embers fall into the darkness. "Sometimes I think you are," he murmured, "and sometimes I think you are made of reinforced steel." He turned to face her. The wind whipped his hair across his forehead. He looked exhausted. The circles under his eyes were dark bruises. He reached out and took her hand, pulling her closer. He didn't ask this time. He just needed her. He pinned her gently against the railing, his body shielding her from the wind. He looked down at her, his expression raw and unguarded. "I am trying to keep this empire standing." "Maya," he said, his voice low, "but I feel the walls cracking. Someone is talking. Someone close." Maya's heart twisted. She opened her mouth to speak, to offer some empty comfort, but he cut her off. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her temple. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the reputation. But if they touch you—" He pulled back to look her in the eye. His face was inches from hers. The romantic tension that had been simmering under the fear and anger boiled over. "If they touch you, I will burn this city until there is nothing left but ash." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. He was promising to burn the world for her, and she was the one handing the match to the arsonists. "Adrian," she breathed. He leaned in to kiss her. It wasn't forceful. It was a question, a plea for connection in a world that was falling apart. Ring. The sound of his phone shattered the moment like a hammer through a mirror. Adrian froze. He pulled back, the softness vanishing from his face instantly, replaced by the cold, hard mask of the boss. He pulled the phone from his pocket and answered it. Vescari. Maya watched him. She saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the railing. She saw the muscle in his jaw jump. "When?" he asked sharply. "How many?" He listened for another second, then hung up. "What happened?" Maya asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "Victor Hale," Adrian said, his voice void of emotion. "He just hit the distribution house in the shipyard. Ambush. 3 of my men are dead." He looked at Maya, but he wasn't seeing her anymore. He was seeing a war map. "Pack a bag," he ordered. "What? Why? You are not going back to your apartment," he said. "It is not safe. Hale is making a move. You stay here." "I can't stay here indefinitely." "Adrian," Maya protested. "You will stay here until I say otherwise," he roared, the violence in his voice making her flinch. He saw the fear in her eyes and stopped. He took a deep breath, running a hand down his face. "Please, Maya, for your own safety, do not leave this building." He turned and strode back inside, already dialing another number, barking orders to prepare for retaliation. Maya stood on the balcony, the wind chilling her to the bone. It wasn't a request, it was a sentence. She was locked in. That night, she lay awake beside him. Adrian was asleep, or pretending to be. His breathing was heavy and rhythmic. Maya lay on her back, staring at the ceiling. Her bag was on the chair in the corner. The wire was inside it, tucked into a hidden pocket. She listened to the city sounds, the sirens, the distant hum of traffic. Somewhere out there, Men were dying because of the war Adrian was fighting. And somewhere out there, Agent Delaney was waiting for her to deliver the final nail in the coffin. She looked at Adrian in the dim light. He looked peaceful. His arm was thrown over his eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered into the darkness. So quiet he couldn't possibly hear. He shifted in his sleep, his hand seeking hers across the sheets. He found her fingers and interlaced them with his own, holding on tight. Maya let a single tear slide down her temple into her hair. She didn't pull her hand away. The next morning, the claustrophobia was unbearable. Adrian had left early, leaving 2 guards at the door of the penthouse. Maya paced the living room for hours. She needed air. She needed to feel like she still owned herself. She told the guards she needed to go to the pharmacy. It was a lie. She just needed to walk. At first, they refused, but Maya was stubborn, and she used the authority Adrian had given her. She told them they could walk with her, but she was going. Reluctantly, they agreed. They walked 3 blocks. The sun was shining, a stark contrast to the mood in the penthouse. Maya felt a brief moment of relief. She was out. She was walking. She stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The 2 guards flanked her, scanning the crowd. "I just need to grab some aspirin," she said, pointing to the drugstore across the street. The light changed. Maya stepped off the curb. A white van screeched around the corner. Mounting the sidewalk, it happened so fast her brain couldn't process it. The side door of the van slid open. 2 men in masks lunged out. Maya's guard shouted, reaching for his weapon, but a burst of automatic gunfire from the van cut him down before he could draw. The crowd screamed. People scrambled, diving for cover. Maya turned to run, but a hand grabbed the back of her jacket. She was yanked backward with terrifying force. Her feet left the ground. "No!" she screamed, thrashing. "Adrian!" She was thrown into the back of the van. She kicked out, her boot connecting with a shin, but a heavy fist struck the side of her head, sending stars exploding across her vision. Her bag was torn from her shoulder. Her phone clattered to the asphalt as the van doors slammed shut, enclosing her in darkness. Maya saw one last glimpse of the world outside through the narrowing gap. Her camera, which had been looped around her wrist, had fallen. It lay on the pavement. The lens shattered, the black plastic body cracked open, the van peeled away, tires smoking, disappearing into the traffic. The wire was useless, the deal was broken, and Maya was gone. The phone call that shattered Adrian Viscari's world lasted less than 10 seconds. He was standing in the center of the penthouse living room, a tumbler of scotch in his hand, watching the door, waiting for Maya to return from her walk. The 2 guards he had sent with her were good men, experienced. He had calculated the risks, and he had decided that 3 blocks in broad daylight was a manageable variable. He was wrong. The phone on the coffee table buzzed. Adrian picked it up. The voice on the other end was breathless, choked with pain. It was one of the guards, bleeding out on the pavement 3 blocks away. "Boss," he wheezed. "They took her. Van, white, no plates." The glass in Adrian's hand did not just fall, it was launched, with a roar that sounded more animal than human. Adrian hurled the heavy crystal tumbler across the room. It struck the far wall, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards that rained down onto the hardwood floor like diamonds. Every muscle in his body seized. For a terrifying second, the room spun. Maya was gone. The woman who had stood on his balcony the night before, the woman who had looked at him with those defiant, terrified eyes and chosen to stay, she was gone. Adrian stormed toward the door, his composure incinerated. He threw the doors open, startling the remaining security staff in the hallway. "Lock down the city," he bellowed. His voice shook with a rage so profound it made the men flinch. "I want every club, every alley, every safe house turned inside out," Adrian commanded, his hands trembling as he checked the magazine of his sidearm. "Call in every favor. Wake up every judge. If a rat moves in the sewers of Harbor City today, I want to know about it. Find her." Consciousness returned to Maya in slow, painful waves. The first thing she noticed was the smell. It was damp, metallic, and old, the scent of standing water and rusting iron. She opened her eyes. The room was vast and dim, lit only by high, grime-streaked windows that let in weak shafts of dusty light. It looked like the skeleton of a factory, long abandoned. She tried to move, but her arms were wrenched back, zip-tied tightly behind a heavy metal chair. Her ankles were bound to the chair legs. Well, look who is finally awake. The voice was smooth, oily, and mockingly polite. Maya lifted her head. Victor Hale stepped out of the shadows. He was a man who wore expensive suits that somehow never looked right on him, as if the fabric itself was trying to reject his frame. He had a face that might have been handsome, if not for the permanent sneer etched into his mouth. He circled her slowly, his footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. The photographer, Hale mused. The girl with the camera. I have to admit, I am disappointed. I expected Viscari to have better taste. Maya remained silent. She tested the strength of the zip ties. They bit into her wrists, unyielding. He let his guard down for you, Hale continued, stopping in front of her. The great Adrian Viscari. The man of discipline, the man of ice. And all it took to break him was a girl with a pretty face and a bleeding heart. Where is he? Maya croaked. Her throat was dry as sandpaper. Hale laughed. Oh, he's out there. Tearing the city apart, making a mess, which is exactly what we wanted. An angry Viscari is a sloppy Viscari. He leaned in close, placing his hands on the arms of her chair. You think you are special to him, don't you? Hale whispered. But you are just a weakness, Maya. A loose thread, and I am going to pull on it until he unravels completely. Maya stared him down. Adrian will kill you. Hale smirked. Perhaps, but he won't save you. You see, Maya, the game is bigger than just me and Adrian. He straightened up, checking his watch. Did you really think the feds were only talking to you? He asked casually. Maya's blood ran cold. Hale saw the recognition in her eyes. Oh, yes. I know about your little chats with Agent Delaney. I know about the wire. You see, I have friends in low places and friends in very high places. There are people in this city, people with badges, people in the mayor's office who want Adrian gone just as much as I do. They are playing both sides of the board. Maya felt the room tilt. The betrayal she had committed, wearing the wire, working with Delaney, had been for nothing. Delaney wasn't protecting her. He was using her to flush Adrian out, while likely feeding information to Hale to ensure Adrian was destroyed. She was just a pawn in a game where everyone was cheating. It is not a war, Hale said, turning his back on her. It is a liquidation sale. And you are the inventory. Harbor City was burning. Not literally, but the heat of Adrian's fury was scorching the underworld. He moved through the city like a natural disaster. His tailored suit was stained with grease and blood, not his own. He had abandoned the sleek black sedan for a nondescript truck, moving with a small, elite team of his most loyal enforcers. They hit 3 gambling dens in 2 hours. Adrian didn't ask polite questions. He kicked down doors. He broke fingers. He looked into the eyes of men who had feared him for a decade and showed them a level of violence that made them pray for the police to arrive. He found the thread in the back room of a laundromat in the packing district, an old associate, a man named Sal who handled logistics for half the gangs in the city, sat trembling as Adrian held a lighter to the stack of ledgers on the desk. Talk. Sal, Adrian roared. Sal cracked. It was a tip, he stammered. Someone inside your organization. They told Hale where she would be. They gave the route. Who? Adrian demanded, the lighter flame flickering inches from the paper. Sal gave a name. It was a lieutenant Adrian had trusted for 5 years. Adrian extinguished the lighter. He didn't kill Sal. He didn't have time. He pulled out his phone. He called his head of security. Find him and find out where Hale is operating. Now. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was a low-level dealer, a kid who worked the corners near the old industrial park. He had seen a white van screech into the abandoned textile factory on the riverfront. Adrian hung up. He looked at his men. We have a location, he said. His voice was no longer a roar. It was a whisper, terrifyingly devoid of inflection. Kill everyone who stands in our way. In the factory. The shadows were lengthening. Maya watched the men guarding her. There were 4 of them, pacing the perimeter, smoking cigarettes. She forced her breathing to slow. She remembered Adrian's voice in the kitchen, teaching her how to read a room. Look at their hands, look at their eyes. Fear makes people sloppy. Confidence makes them blind. She needed them to be blind. When one of the guards, a younger man with a nervous twitch, approached to check her bonds, Maya let her head loll forward. She slumped in the chair, making herself look smaller. "Broken water," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please." The guard hesitated. He looked at Hale, who was on the phone across the room. "Give her a drink," Hale called out without looking. "We need her alive for the grand finale." The guard pulled a bottle of water from his pocket. He had to holster his weapon to unscrew the cap. He leaned in, loosening the gag around her neck. Maya drank greedily, some of the water spilling down her chin. She coughed, exaggerating the movement, making her body shudder as if she were on the verge of collapse. "Pathetic," the guard muttered, but his posture relaxed. He saw a victim, not a threat. Hale walked over as the guard stepped back. He dismissed the man with a wave of his hand. He looked at Maya, studying her face. "You know," Hale said softly, "Adrian has a lot of money, but he lacks vision. He thinks he can buy redemption." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. He reached out and touched the side of her neck. His fingers were cold and clammy. He trailed them down to her collarbone, a gesture that was meant to possess, to terrify. "Does he touch you like this?" Hale whispered. "Does he make you feel like you belong to him?" Maya flinched violently, pulling away as far as the chair would allow, but she didn't look down. She glared at him. In that moment, the memory of the storm crashed into her mind. She remembered Adrian's hand on her back, heavy, warm, grounding. She remembered his fingers tucking the hair behind her ear, trembling slightly. "Tell me to stop and I will," Adrian asked. She thought fiercely. "This monster takes—" That distinction cut through her fear like a knife. Even in his darkness, Adrian had given her agency. Victor Hale was trying to strip it away. "He touches me," Maya spat, her voice finding steel. "Like a man. You touch like a coward." Hale's eyes narrowed. He raised his hand to strike her. The sound of glass shattering erupted from the roof. The skylights exploded inward before the glass even hit the floor. Ropes dropped from the gloom of the rafters. Dark shapes descended with tactical precision, sliding down into the factory floor. Smoke grenades detonated, filling the vast space with choking white fog. Adrian hit the ground, running. He didn't wait for cover. He moved through the smoke like a phantom, his gun raising and firing in a fluid motion. 2 of Hale's guards went down instantly. Confusion erupted. Gunfire echoed off the metal walls, deafening and chaotic. Maya screamed as a bullet sparked off the concrete floor inches from her chair. She couldn't stay here. She was a sitting duck. Adrenaline flooded her system. She threw her weight to the side. With a grunt of effort, she tipped the heavy metal chair over. She crashed to the hard floor, her shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. Pain flared, hot and sharp, but she ignored it. She was horizontal now, below the line of fire. She began to crawl. It was an agonizing shuffle, dragging the heavy chair with her, inch by inch, toward the cover of a large, rusted generator. She heard shouting, "Vascari!" Hale screamed somewhere in the smoke. Maya pressed her cheek against the cold concrete. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Adrian, please be Adrian." Adrian moved through the haze, his heart hammering a rhythm of pure terror. He wasn't thinking about tactics anymore. He was thinking about Maya. He saw the overturned chair. He saw the drag marks in the dust. He turned toward the generator. A figure lunged out of the smoke. Hale. Hale grabbed Maya by the hair, hauling her up from the floor. He jammed the barrel of his gun against her temple. "Drop it," Hale screamed. "Drop it or I paint the wall with her." Adrian froze. The smoke swirled around them, clearing just enough to reveal the tableau. Hale stood behind Maya, using her body as a shield. Maya's face was streaked with dirt and tears, her lip bleeding, but her eyes were locked on Adrian. Adrian stood 10 feet away. His chest was heaving. His suit was ruined, his knuckles raw. He held his gun steady, aimed right at Hale's eye, but he couldn't fire. The angle was too tight. If he missed by an inch— "Let her go, Victor," Adrian said. His voice was low, vibrating with a lethal promise. "This ends now. It ends when you are dead," Hale shouted, pressing the gun harder against Maya's head. Adrian's eyes flicked to Maya. He saw the terror there, but he also saw something else. She wasn't limp. Her legs were braced. She was watching him, waiting. He needed an opening. Adrian took a slow step forward, lowering his gun an inch. "You want me?" Adrian asked. "Take me. Let her walk out, and I will put the gun down." Hale hesitated. The offer was tempting. His greed flickered in his eyes. In that split second of hesitation, Maya moved. She didn't try to pull away. Instead, she threw her weight backward, slamming her head into Hale's face. Hale grunted, stumbling back half a step, the gun wavering. Maya screamed and kicked backward with both feet, driving her heels into Hale's shin. It wasn't a martial arts move. It was a desperate, scrappy fight for survival. But it was enough. Hale's gun swung wide. Adrian didn't hesitate. He didn't shoot. He holstered his weapon and launched himself across the gap. He tackled Hale, slamming him into the metal generator. The impact knocked the breath out of both men. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs. Hale scrambled for his gun. Adrian smashed a fist into his face, then another. This wasn't a clean fight. It was a brawl. It was metal and bone and snarled curses. Hale managed to land a punch to Adrian's ribs, but Adrian didn't even flinch. He was fueled by a rage that had been building since the moment he saw the empty sidewalk. He grabbed Hale's wrist, twisting it until the gun clattered away across the concrete. Adrian drove his knee into Hale's chest, pinning him. He wrapped his hand around Hale's throat. For a second, Adrian looked ready to tear the man's throat out with his bare hands. His face was a mask of pure violence. "Adrian!" Maya's voice cut through the red haze. Adrian froze. He looked up. Maya was lying on the floor, still bound to the chair, watching him. "Don't," she whispered. Adrian looked back down at Hale, who was gasping for air, eyes bulging. Adrian released his grip. He stood up, breathing hard. He kicked Hale in the temple, a single, calculated blow that knocked the man unconscious. "Secure him!" Adrian barked to his men, who were emerging from the smoke. Then he turned to Maya. He fell to his knees beside her. His hands, usually so steady, were shaking violently as he pulled a knife from his belt and sliced through the zip ties binding her wrists and ankles. The plastic snapped. Maya pulled her arms free, crying out as the blood rushed back into her numb limbs before she could even try to stand. Adrian reached for her. He gathered her into his arms, pulling her off the dirty floor and against his chest. "I'm sorry," he choked out, burying his face in her neck. "I am so sorry, Maya. I should never have let you leave the building. I should have protected you." He was rocking her slightly, clutching her as if he needed to physically absorb her pain. Maya grabbed the front of his ruined shirt. Her fingers dug into the fabric, holding on for dear life. She sobbed, the adrenaline crash finally hitting her. "I chose to go." She wept into his chest. "I made my own choices." "Adrian, you didn't do this." He pulled back just enough to look at her. He cupped her face in both of his hands. His thumbs wiped away the dirt and the tears, smearing blood on her cheek. His blood, her blood. It didn't matter anymore. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his eyes frantically scanning her face. "Did he hurt you?" "I am okay," she whispered. "I am okay." He pressed his forehead against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, their hearts beating in a frantic, syncopated rhythm. Then Adrian kissed her. It wasn't the smooth, seductive kiss of the penthouse. It was messy. It was desperate. It tasted of salt and iron and smoke. He kissed her like a man who had stared into the abyss and been pulled back at the last second. He kissed her to prove she was warm, that she was breathing, that she was there. Maya kissed him back with equal desperation. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, needing his weight to ground her reality. The wire, the FBI, the lies. They all melted away in the face of this terrifying, undeniable truth. She loved him, and he loved her. Adrian broke the kiss, gasping for air, But he didn't let her go. He wrapped his arms fully around her, burying his face in her hair. "We are leaving," he whispered fiercely. "We are getting out of here." Maya closed her eyes, listening to the wail of sirens approaching in the distance. She knew it wasn't over. The police were coming. Delaney was coming. The cage was closing in. But as she held on to the man who had burned the city to find her, she realized she didn't care about the cage anymore, as long as he was in it with her. The penthouse was silent, but it was not the peaceful silence of the morning after the storm. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. Adrian sat on the leather sofa, his shirt off, a fresh bandage wrapped around his ribs where he had taken a blow during the fight at the factory. He held a glass of whiskey, but he was not drinking it. He was staring at a tablet on the coffee table. Maya stood by the glass doors leading to the balcony, her arms wrapped around herself. The bruises on her wrists from the zip ties were fading to a sickly yellow, but the internal bruising felt fresh and raw. "We found him," Adrian said, his voice devoid of inflection. Maya turned slowly. "Victor?" "No," Adrian said. He looked up, his eyes cold and hard. "Agent Delaney. My contact in the federal prosecutor's office sent over the operation files an hour ago." He slid the tablet across the table toward her. Maya walked over, her legs feeling like lead. She looked at the screen. It was a memo, redacted in places, but the summary was clear. Operation Clean Sweep. Asset Maya Collins. Status disposable. Primary objective: destabilize Vascari and Hale syndicates to allow for municipal restructuring. Disposable. Adrian read the word aloud, tasting the bitterness of it. They never planned to protect you, Maya. They never planned to help Liam. They sent you in here with a wire, hoping I would find it and kill you. Your death was going to be the pretext for a federal raid that would wipe out my family and the corrupt councilman in one stroke. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. She sank onto the edge of the sofa, far away from him. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know," Adrian said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that was slowly waking up. "But you helped them." Maya closed her eyes. The moment had come. The truth she had been hiding, the betrayal that had been eating her alive, was finally out in the open. "I wore a wire," she confessed. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. She waited for the explosion. She waited for the glass to shatter against the wall, for the shouting, for the violence she had seen him unleash on the world to save her. It didn't come. Instead, Adrian turned around. His expression was not angry. It was shattered. "When?" he asked. His voice was a rough whisper. "The dinner with the councilman," she said, tears spilling over her lashes. "And the night before I was taken." Adrian stepped closer. He stopped inches from her, his presence overwhelming. He smelled of antiseptic and the expensive scotch he used to numb the pain. "The night in the guest room?" he asked, his eyes searching hers with a desperate intensity. "The morning you watched me sleep? Was that real? Or was that just part of the job?" Maya stood up, closing the distance between them. She reached for him, but stopped her hands inches from his chest, afraid he would flinch away. "It was real," she swore, her voice breaking. "I did it to save Liam, Adrian. I thought I had no choice. But my feelings for you, they were never part of the deal. I fell in love with you in the middle of the lie. That is why I couldn't tell you. I was terrified of losing you, and I was terrified of getting you killed." Adrian looked at her for a long, agonizing minute. He looked at the tears tracking down her cheeks, the honesty in her amber eyes. He saw the woman who had fought Victor Hale's men, the woman who had stayed. He let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging. He reached out and took her hand, and he didn't pull her into a kiss. He just held her hand, his thumb tracing the bruising on her wrist. "If we run, they will hunt us," he said quietly. "Delaney has his narrative. He needs us to be the villains so he can be the hero who cleaned up Harbor City." "I am tired of running," Maya whispered. Adrian nodded. A cold, sharp light entered his eyes, the look of a general planning a final offensive. "Then we stop running," he said. "We turn the trap around. The plan was madness, but it was the only card they had left to play." Adrian called for a peace summit. He invited the remaining heads of the rival factions, the corrupt city councilman and the deputy mayor. The premise was simple. With Victor Hale's organization fractured, they needed to carve up the territory and establish a truce. It was to be held at the Meridian, neutral ground. Maya stood in front of the mirror in the master bedroom. She wore a floor-length gown of emerald silk, backless and elegant. Underneath the silk, taped to the small of her back, was a transmitter. But this time, it wasn't just feeding audio to Agent Delaney's van parked 3 blocks away. Adrian's tech specialist had rigged a secondary feed. It was a direct line to an independent server, scheduled to broadcast live to the websites of 5 major news outlets and every social media platform in the city the moment the signal went live. Adrian walked in behind her. He wore a tuxedo, looking every inch the prince of the city. He met her eyes in the mirror. "Are you ready?" he asked. Maya touched the camera disguised as a heavy crystal pendant around her neck. "Let the city hear," she whispered. The Meridian was transformed. The thumping bass was replaced by a string quartet. The dark corners were illuminated by crystal chandeliers brought in for the occasion. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. It was a room full of sharks smiling at each other. Maya moved through the crowd. She smiled at the deputy mayor, who patted her arm condescendingly. She nodded to the men who had ordered hits on Adrian's crew. Every handshake, every whispered threat, every bribe disguised as a business deal was being captured by the pendant around her neck. She could feel the heat of the transmitter against her skin. Adrian was across the room, holding court. He looked relaxed, but Maya knew him better now. She saw the tension in his jaw. She saw his eyes tracking her every movement, making sure no one got too close. He caught her eye and signaled. Maya made her way to the balcony doors. Adrian met her there, offering his hand. "Dance with me," he said. They stepped out onto the small, private balcony. The city skyline was a wall of light against the black sky. The wind was cold, but Adrian was warm. He placed one hand on her waist, pulling her flush against him. He took her other hand, interlacing their fingers. They began to move in a slow, unhurried rhythm to the music drifting out from the hall. "You are trembling," he murmured, his lips brushing her ear. "I am scared," she admitted, resting her head against his chest. She could hear his heart beating, steady, strong, rhythmic. "Good," Adrian said. "Fear keeps you sharp." He spun her slowly, his hand sliding up her back to shield her from the wind. His thumb traced soothing circles on her skin, a tender contrast to the danger surrounding them. "Listen to me, Maya," he whispered, his voice low and urgent. "When this starts, it is going to get ugly. Hale's remnants are desperate. If I give the signal, or if shots are fired, you run. You do not look back for me. You get the footage to the server and you disappear. I am not leaving you," she whispered into his lapel. "You have to," he said, his fingers tightening at her waist as if the thought of letting her go was physically painful. "The truth is the only weapon we have. You are the one who has to pull the trigger." He pulled back to look at her. His eyes were full of a raw, aching love that made her breath hitch. "I love you," he said, before she could answer. The glass doors behind them shattered. It wasn't a signal Adrian gave. It was the crash of the doors being kicked in. 4 men in tactical gear burst onto the balcony from the adjacent roof. At the same moment, shouting erupted inside the ballroom. Victor Hale's remaining loyalists had found a way in. "Get down," Adrian roared. He shoved Maya behind a marble column, shielding her with his body as the first gunshot cracked through the air. Chaos detonated inside the hall. The string quartet stopped. Guests screamed, diving under tables. Champagne flutes shattered, sending glass flying like shrapnel. Adrian pulled a gun from his waistband. He had smuggled it in despite his own security protocols. He fired back at the attackers on the balcony, forcing them into cover. "Stay here," he shouted to Maya over the din. He moved away from the column, drawing fire, shouting orders to his security team who were engaging the shooters inside the hall. Maya crouched behind the marble, her heart hammering against her ribs. She clutched the pendant camera. She saw the deputy mayor crawling toward the exit. She saw the rival gang leaders pulling weapons. If she stayed hidden, she survived. If she stayed hidden, the story died here, buried in a police report about a gang war. Adrian was fighting for her. He was risking his empire, his life, to buy her a way out. Maya looked at the camera lens in her hand. "Touch me and I'll scream." She stood up. She didn't run for the exit. She walked toward the main staircase that overlooked the ballroom. Her legs shook, but her steps were determined. She reached up and ripped the pendant from her neck, holding it out like a microphone, like a weapon. She hit the activation switch on the transmitter at her back. The light turned green. Live. She took a breath that filled her lungs with the scent of gunpowder and expensive perfume. "Stop!" she screamed. Her voice was not a shriek of terror. It was a command. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling, cutting through the screams of the guests. For a second, the shock of a woman in an emerald gown standing in the line of fire caused a lull in the shooting. "My name is Maya Collins," she shouted, her voice trembling with rage, "and everyone in this city is watching you." She turned the camera to the deputy mayor. Deputy Mayor Harrison took a bribe of $50,000 tonight to ignore the shipments coming through the shipyard. She turned the camera to the rival boss. "The Northside crew is moving fentanyl through the school district." She turned the camera to the chaos, to the violence, and Agent Delaney of the FBI. She yelled, her voice breaking with the sheer force of her defiance. "Set this up. He authorized a war in a room full of civilians to advance his career." Phones in the crowd lit up. News alerts began to ping. The feed was out. The city was waking up. "Get her!" someone screamed. A gunman on the balcony raised his weapon, aiming at the woman on the stairs. Adrian saw him. He didn't have a clear shot. He was too far away. He did the only thing he could. He broke cover. Adrian sprinted across the open floor. As the gunman fired, Adrian threw himself into the path of the bullet. He slammed into the base of the stairs, jerking violently as the round caught him in the shoulder. "Adrian!" Maya shrieked. He didn't fall. He gritted his teeth, grabbing the banister with his good hand and fired 3 shots back at the balcony. The gunman fell. Adrian collapsed to his knees, blood blossoming dark and fast against his white shirt. Maya threw herself down beside him. She dropped the camera. It didn't matter. It was still streaming from the floor. She pressed her hands over the wound, feeling the hot, sticky blood coat her fingers. "Stay with me," she begged, tears blinding her. "Please, Adrian, stay with me." Adrian looked up at her. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead, but the corner of his mouth twitched up in that familiar, arrogant smirk. "They heard you," he whispered, his voice raspy with pain. "The whole city. They heard you." The doors to the ballroom burst open again. This time, it wasn't gangsters. It was a swarm of FBI agents and SWAT teams, federal agents. "Drop your weapons." The room became a sea of red laser sights and shouting. Agent Delaney stormed in, looking for his victory. But as he looked around, he saw the guests holding up their phones. He saw the news vans that had pulled up outside, alerted by the stream. He saw the feed playing on a monitor behind the bar. His face went white. He wasn't the hero. He was the villain in high definition. Medics pushed through the line. They pulled Maya away from Adrian. "No!" she cried, reaching for him. Adrian caught her eye as they lifted him onto a stretcher. He didn't look afraid. He looked at peace. He had kept his promise. He had protected her. The courtroom was packed. It was 6 months later. Adrian stood before the judge. He wore a simple gray suit. His arm was in a sling, the shoulder still healing. He didn't fight the charges. He allocated, "I am guilty." "Your Honor," Adrian said, his voice clear and steady, "I ran a criminal enterprise. I ordered acts of violence." He paused, glancing at the gallery. Maya sat in the front row. She was holding her camera. She looked tired, but she was smiling, a sad, proud smile. "But I also offer full evidence against Victor Hale's network," Adrian continued, "and against the councilman who enabled us. The plea deal was historic. It dismantled the Viscari family from the top down. It purged the city council. It sent Agent Delaney to federal prison for entrapment and reckless endangerment. The judge handed down the sentence. 7 years. eligible for parole in 4. It was a long time, but it wasn't life. As the bailiffs led him away, Adrian stopped. He looked back at the gallery. He found Maya's face in the sea of reporters. He nodded once, a silent promise. "I will come back." Maya raised her hand, pressing her palm against her heart. "I will wait." Harbor City changed. It wasn't a paradise overnight, but the smog seemed to lift. The new mayor was a boring, honest woman from the suburbs. The docks were quiet. Maya Collins became a household name. Her photo exhibition, Shadows of the Harbor, won a Pulitzer. It featured stark, black and white images of the city's corruption, its victims, and its resilience. But in her small apartment, in a locked drawer, there was another album. It was filled with photos of a man in a penthouse, a man looking out at the rain, a man sleeping with his arm thrown over an empty pillow, a man smiling at a camera with a tenderness that contradicted his reputation. She visited him every week. They spoke through glass, then through a mesh screen. They talked about books. They talked about Liam, who was healthy and attending college. They talked about the future. 4 years and 2 months later, it was a warm evening in October. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and autumn leaves. Maya stood on the rooftop of her apartment building. It was a modest building, nothing like the glass tower where she had first met him. There were clotheslines strung up and a few potted tomato plants. The door to the roof creaked open. Maya turned around. Adrian stood there. He looked different. He was thinner. His hair was a little longer, touched with gray at the temples. He wore a simple jacket and jeans. Holding a duffel bag, he stopped at the edge of the roof, looking at her as if she were a mirage that might vanish if he moved too fast. "Maya?" he asked softly. She didn't run to him. She walked slowly, savoring every step, closing the distance that had separated them for over 1,000 days. She stopped in front of him. She reached out and took the bag from his hand, setting it on the ground. Then she placed her hand on his cheek. His skin was warm, real. Adrian closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. He let out a breath that sounded like he had been holding it for 4 years. "Are you still afraid?" he whispered, opening his eyes. "Are you still afraid to be touched by me?" Maya stepped into his space. She placed her other hand flat over his heart. She could feel it beating. Steady, strong, hers. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "If you ever hurt me again," she said softly, echoing the words she had spoken in that alley so long ago, "I will scream." Adrian flinched slightly, the old guilt flashing in his eyes. "But," she continued, smiling through her tears, "this time, I won't be screaming for help. I will be screaming to call the whole world to stand beside me. I will scream to tell them that you are mine." Adrian let out a choked laugh. The darkness that had shadowed him for so long seemed to break apart, dissolved by the light in her eyes. He reached out, his arm curling around her waist with a reverence that made her knees weak. "Then let them hear," he whispered. He pulled her into a kiss. It was gentle at first, a question asked and answered. Then it deepened, becoming a promise. It was a kiss of mutual accountability, of shared scars, and of a love that had survived the fire. They stood there on the rooftop, holding each other as the Harbor City lights flickered on below them. They were no longer the boss and the witness. They were just a man and a woman, standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever the city threw at them next, together. "Thank you so much for listening to Touch Me and I'll Scream," she warned. The mafia boss just smirked. "Then let the city hear." I hope you enjoyed this journey through Harbor City with Maya and Adrian. It was a roller coaster of emotions, danger, and redemption. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a rainy city like Harbor City, or somewhere sunny? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of dangerous love, twisted loyalty, and hard-won happy endings. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending. Did Adrian redeem himself in your eyes? Until next time, keep reading and keep dreaming.